Many of the modern hitting metrics that we're hearing a lot about, like launch angle and exit velocity in particular, both of those were introduced to the hitting world in an experiment that we did with Jay Bell back in 2001. Jay was a two-time All-Star, 17-year major leaguer, and we were setting out to show that hitting is actually a guess. You cannot control the launch angle as it comes off the bat. So let's take a look at what we did. We set this up at about 10 degrees upward so that the target, the exact middle of that target was set to be at about 10 degrees upward. So what happened in the beginning was he had 3 balls that he hit perfect, and then he had a bunch of balls that were a little bit low left. We're not going to get into the reasons behind that. That's the whole point of the video, is explaining how trajectory can help us map out what's going on in your swing. But what I do want to point out is the fact that in the after test, after we did some adjusting with some simple stuff in his setup and his swing, was he more than doubled the amount of balls that he hit perfect. But more importantly, the balls that he missed were in an area that made a lot more sense. The ground balls that he hit were at a higher exit velocity, and the fly balls that he hit were actually higher line drives that were what we would consider today barrels. Those were the balls that were hit somewhat accidentally, actually very accidentally, but they ended up in an area that had the right launch angle at the right exit velocity, and that would be what today's barrels would be. We used in the live exit speed, we didn't have such a thing at that time. In 2001, there was no way to measure exit speed. So what we did was we made one up, and it was the idea of combining exit speed with the quality of the contact. So we had to judge that. It wasn't objective because we had no idea what the exit velocity would be. But after thousands and thousands of tests with exit velocity off the tee, I knew that the live had to be somewhere close. But if we were anywhere within about 10 degrees one way or the other off of a perfectly hit ball, then we knew that we were going to get our max exit velocities. All happened within that basic area. And we'll take a look at Josh Donaldson's launch angle, and we'll see that most of the hits are going to show up in that basic area. What a 4 was a rocket fly ball high line drive, and it was headed in a trajectory that was basically what today's barrels would be. A 3 just missed it. In fact, some of those could have been barrels. And as we started to get higher, like an outfield pop-up, that was a 2, and an infield pop-up was a 1, and then the same thing on the ground, a ball that was dribbling, a 5 or 6 hopper, and then a well-hit hard ground ball and a rocket ground ball would have been a 4. So the perfect contact was upwards at about 10 degrees, and we were looking for how often can you do that, and what happens to your misses. Now in Jay's case, he averaged about 3.7 points, and possibly more importantly, his average ball was a ground ball. That was the trajectory of the average ball. When we made the adjustments, what we were doing was testing for and training how to hit more barrels. And basically, the way that we came about that was the whole concept behind hitting as a guess, which is you can't control that line that you're hitting it on. Because if you could, you would do it every time. There's only 3 possibilities. If you take 2 round things and you assume that you're going to hit the ball, there's only 3 possible outcomes. One is to hit it perfect. The other is to be a little above center or a little below center. And you literally have no control over which one of those things is going to happen. Let's take a look at what I mean by that. We took the most perfect scenario from someone who has come out, the author of Just Say No to Ground Balls. And in his defense, I think what he's honestly saying is instructors stop telling kids to swing down to hit ground balls. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's the only thing that really makes sense. And that's honestly what I think he's trying to say. At any point, we took what would be a perfect pitch. If we looked at the strike zone and we took out all pitches except for the exact middle of the strike zone and nothing but fastballs, He had 394 of those over 2014 through 2017. We wanted to make sure it was a big enough sample size to where it actually made some sense. And the goal was, how did he do on those pitches? Because if we could control launch angle, then it would certainly happen on pitches that were right down central. His batting average 409 in that area, and really impressive. And his exit velocity 99 miles an hour. Again, really impressive. But if we're going to actually measure something exact, let's look at how many times he swung. 317 times. And I can only assume when you swing at a ball in the middle and your stated goal is to try to hit barrels on a trajectory that's somewhere in that basic vicinity. And a barrel means not just one line of trajectory, but actually kind of a range of areas. So there's actually a lot of mishits that are in these areas. But again, remember what we said earlier, most of the hits are going to happen in this area where he's mishitting balls slightly. But there is one line, and it's not necessarily where I drew it here, but this is just to kind of indicate, no matter where you put that line, there's only 3 or 4 or maybe 5 or 6 balls that are hit at the right speed and at the right trajectory to be called perfect. So even if we give him the barrels concept and we say that 21 barrels that he hit in that time, then we are at 6.6% of the balls that he swung at were balls that ended up in that perfect area. If we really get down to brass tacks, we actually have to look at just one line. Now I know this is crazy, I know this is really fine minutia, but at the end of the day, that's what we asked, is can you control contact? And the answer is yes, 100% you can control it at 2%. Meaning, without question, you can control it about 2%. You might be able to increase that a little bit. I'm sure there's examples of that. But over time, you're just simply not going to be able to control launch angle. Thus the term guess. If you can't control it, then it's basically a guess. What we can control is everything that leads up to that. You can control your swing line, you can control your timing, you can control all kinds of stuff that's going on before contact. But at the moment of contact, all of that stuff is out of the hitter's control. Because even though he's trying to say no to ground balls, there's a lot of ground balls in this picture. In fact, it's just about the same amount of ground balls as there are balls that are hit exactly where he wants them to go. This is just a different way to look at it, but it breaks it down with how many swings and misses, how many foul balls, and we can only assume that he's trying to hit every one of those pitches that's exactly in the middle, because why would you pass that up? That's what you hunt for, that's what you're looking for. So my assumption is that he's swinging with the intent of hitting it on that perfect trajectory, but only doing it 1.9% perfectly, 6.6% if we give him that leeway of hitting it within a certain cone shape that we would call barrels. In reality, though, hitting is a guess, and you cannot control that line.